Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
As a native who actually grew up on the Navajo res, I find outsiders' concept of skinwalkers hilarious. The real stories are so much scarier. Spoilers. It is nothing like the rehashed B-horror movie bullshit y'all are posting. The background of it is hell of complicated, you'd have to understand Navajo religion. But basically, there is a very strong concept of good and of evil, of harmony and disharmony, and of the beauty way of right action. It is a very secretive religion, and our holy men train for decades before they are allowed to perform rituals. Most of our religious rituals have to do with cleansing someone of spiritual corruption. The religion is full of taboos. If you break even a minor taboo, you have to go through an elaborate multi-day ceremony with holy men singing over you to cleanse yourself. Skinwalkers are holy men who have obtained new spiritual power through breaking taboos. Basically, they have to do everything the opposite of the beauty way. They are witches and sorcerers who initiate themselves onto the Skinwalker path by committing an unforgivable act, like incest, murder of a family member, or cannibalism, or all of these combined. To maintain their powers, they must continue to find new ways of corrupting themselves, new blasphemies. They are basically serial murderers, assaulters, cannibals who gain scare you shitless supernatural abilities from their crimes. They revel in causing disease and madness. They are not werewolves, like some people like to say. They are called skinwalkers because it was said that they danced wearing the skins of their victims, and could take on the appearance of people they killed to get closer to new victims. There is a lot of speculation as to where the skinwalker myth came from. The theory I like best is that it was related to the Anasazi. The words for Anasazi and Navajo all have to do with ancient enemies, or a similar phrase. The Anasazi were a civilization of Pueblo tribes who fought with the Navajo for many centuries. They died off at some point, just disappeared, and the ruins of their cities and cliff dwellings are still scattered around the southwest. Most of these places are taboo. The Navajo, Dine, people are forbidden from going there. One theory is that the original skinwalkers were just Anasazi shamans, who danced in animal skins and practiced ritual cannibalism, ancestor worship, a bunch of stuff that the Navajo religion forbids. When they were at war, the Navajo created all of these stories about the feared witches of the Anasazi. Then the Anasazi died out and their civilization collapsed, probably due to a disease epidemic, and this scares the shit out of the neighboring tribes. Everything related to the Anasazi way of life becomes considered taboo, and it is thought that they brought destruction upon themselves through evil acts. Still, some Anasazi culture B would have survived, among the prisoners of war and slaves taken by the Navajo. Those slaves probably snuck out at night to the ruins to practice their old rituals, and the legends of skinwalkers doing their rituals in Anasazi ruins was born.
I had heard about the murder of the family member, but in the legends I have heard and read, the skinwalkers are shifters that are cursed by those crimes, and are therefore granted the ability to take on different human forms in addition to animal forms. I know that many cultures have their own versions of them, but I don't know many specifics.
The shape-shifting is only an illusion to attract prey. It's not like in the show True Blood, or something like that where they get confused with werewolves and people who can shapeshift into animals. Some say that skinwalkers can run all fours very fast, but they are still human. The Navajo were a sheep and goat-reliant culture, they were shepherds. So wolves and wild dogs are despised. Coyotes, too. If you hear somebody talking about Navajo religion and wolf totems, it is bullshit. Wild canines were considered evil because they were a threat to the livestock herds and to civilization. Coyote is a very dark figure in Navajo myth, not a playful trickster. Wild canines represent hatred of all that is good, chaos and imbalance. So skinwalkers are called wolves as an insult. The Pueblo peoples, like the Anasazi, do view wild canines in a positive light, and some of the clans saw them as being sacred or totemic. Yet another reason that skinwalkers are probably a myth derived from Pueblo shamanic practice.
New friend here. After spending some time reading most of the stories in this thread, I see some reappearing elements. A lot of the stories feature a guy disappearing, returning but being different, as if someone else has taken control of his body. He then tries to lure people off alone with him. At the end of the story, the person whose attitude has changed considerably is silent, awkward and unfamiliar with the social setting. Then there's some spotting of the creature with some fur, generally a large creature, and it screeches. At the very end, one or more people in the story have a memory of the entire event that is different to the collective memory. What have I been describing? Is this the skinwalker thing?
Oh, and the putrid, acid-like, copper smell also resurfaces a bit.
And once the creature has taken control over whomever was lost for a long time, the persona mimics his voice, as in it sounds a little off. The prime example being the guy who originally could not pronounce an R sound later is fully able to. And the other story, with the friend in the car who has a laugh that is 100% identical each time, and mimics his facial expressions and repeats some stuff from the radio.
Skinwalker is a legend from certain Native American tribes. Most of the stories come from the Navajo or Dine people, but neighboring tribes such as the Hopi and Zuni sometimes share the skinwalker stories as well. In Navajo mythology, a skinwalker is basically a sorcerer that works to bring evil into the world, in exchange for his or her powers. These powers include shapeshifting, or wearing the skins of human beings they have murdered, flight, and the ability to curse or hypnotize people. They are by nature evil and revel in violence and human misery. Many books, movies, television shows have used the skinwalker stories for inspiration. However, in popular media they are usually depicted as being a type of werewolf similar to those found in European folklore, or as a stereotypical native medicine man who can shapeshift into an animal form. Some also use the term skinwalker to describe stories about body snatchers or alien or demonic beings mimicking the appearance of humans. Most of the stories in this thread are about body snatchers or are stories of possession. On the Navajo reservation, belief in skinwalkers is still very strong and they are considered to be extremely dangerous and frightening individuals. They are not considered scary because they can mimic another person's appearance, but rather because they do so to attract their next victim. So, like serial killers that can make themselves look like your mom, or your girlfriend, or your best friend after they have murdered that person and danced around in their skin. It is a black magic thing. But really, most people don't even know about the original Navajo myths, so a skinwalker can be any creepy skin-stealing shapeshifter.
All I read about it is from this thread. And your post, which was quite insightful. Any more lore on the body snatchers, or just more clarifying detail? Thanks in advance.
I have to go, but try Googling Kagras syndrome. There are also certain dissociative disorders that cause people to feel like their bodies are not their own, and their movements will become jerky as they try to imitate normal facial expressions and body language. Good luck on your search for the paranormal and creepy, Anon. Have a good night.
Kagras syndrome, also known as Kagras delusion, is the irrational belief that a familiar person or place has been replaced with an exact duplicate. Daughter Mary becomes a pretender while real Mary is somewhere else.
I used to work with quite a few Navajos in the Four Corners area of New Mexico. I worked with this one Navajo guy in particular most of the time. He was my age, early 20s, and for the most part just like any other guy my age. For whatever reason one day he asked me if I had ever heard of a Skinwalker. I had no fucking clue what he was talking about, so I asked him. First thing he tells me is not to talk about them with any of the other Navajo guys at the work site, especially the older guys. Normally he was a pretty funny, laid-back guy, but as soon as he starts describing his experience with what he believed was a Skinwalker, he got real serious and real quiet. Other posters on here are correct. To the Navajo, Skinwalkers are witches who break some of the biggest taboos of traditional Navajo culture to gain power. One of these that my co-worker described to me was that they would go to ancient Anasazi ruins, like the one where we worked, and dig for skeletons to steal the bones, which they would grind to make poisons and potions to do various things from curses to death. He told me that most Navajos wouldn't even work at the site like the one we were at, but since they were so poor on the res and the jobs paid so well that him and the other guys took it anyway. Anyway, on to the experience that he described to me. So he and his brother are hanging out drinking one night near his house on the res. He says that at one point they hear rustling near where their truck is parked. They don't think much of it, keep shooting the shit, drinking. A few minutes later they hear a louder rustling, and a shriek that he said was the most terrifying thing he's ever heard. His brother grabs his shotgun out of the truck and shoots in the direction of the screech. Hear something scampering away into the sagebrush. They jump in the truck and speed away. I never asked him about it again, and he never brought it up. But I fucking believe him.
I have an original story. Not that scary, but I've never been able to forget it. I would have been 16 at this time back when I lived in a small town in Arizona. I was chilling in my room reading a book. My cat was sleeping next to me. I was really absorbed in this book when all of a sudden a somewhat loud noise on my roof scared the shit out of me. I lived at the end of the house and the noise started exactly right over where my head would have been. My first thought was it was my cat, but then I remembered that he was next to me. And I look over and he is wide awake on all fours staring his ass off at the spot where the noise had come from. He didn't take his eyes off of the spot at all. That's when I started getting a really bad feeling. I tried thinking quickly of what it could be. Maybe a friend. Because the corner of the house I was in was also right next to a shed which would have allowed someone to get onto the roof if they were a really good jumper. But their legs would have probably bumped the sides of the house as well. Not to mention I would probably have heard something getting on the trailer if they were average height. In the minute I was thinking what the fuck that could have been, and my cat continued staring. Whatever it was moved. Slow steps, taking 3 to 5 seconds with each step. Living in a crappy trailer, I could tell this thing was heavier than when I've heard my mom and dad on the roof fixing the cooler. That's when my heart just drops because something that heavy shouldn't have been able to get on my roof without making more noise. It continues walking slow as fuck over the area where the hallway was. All this time my cat is just staring at the exact area where it would be, which just freaks me out even more. It continues over the hallway towards the kitchen and very close to the living room. That's when my 2 dogs, a badass Fela German Shepherd mix, go insane. They've never done that if a deer or another dog was outside, so I'm freaking out. Once my dogs go all vicious, the walking just stops. My dogs continue to wail for 1 minute, then suddenly just stop and my cat just lays back down like nothing happened. The noise doesn't continue, which really fucks with my brain, which is already in overdrive trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. My trailer would have been standing at about 15 feet and the only way for that thing to get down was jump off without making a loud thud when it hit the ground. Or if it had walked back to my area and used the shed to help. So I'm wondering if whatever is up there is still there. I get up and can't help but satisfy my curiosity. I open my door and whisper for Jag and Tonka. I'm surprised no one else in my house is up and awake after their wailing. I grab a heavy flashlight, mostly for killing purposes, from the cupboard and go to the door in the hallway that was just walked over. I turn on the floodlight and question if I should do this. I say fuck it and open the door and my dogs burst outside. I take a deep breath and pretty much jump over the porch, not wanting to be near the edge of the house. When I land on the ground, I see my dogs are running around sniffing the ground like crazy. They actually pick up a scent and look at me wanting to chase it. I don't let them. I shine my flashlight on the roof. But I see nothing but the cooler. This just kills me inside. Because whatever this was would have had to jump off the house. I've done that before, but I had to hang off the edge to make sure I didn't break anything. I nope the fuck back inside. My dogs are reluctant as hell to go back in because they are excited by the scent. Finally coax them back in. Lock the door and go and sit in my bed trying to get some idea of what it could have been. 6 years later I still think about that shit. It never happened again. I'm glad I moved away the next year. Always weird shit happening at that place. Especially since I lived next to state land.
I don't know much about the Skinwalker, but I could tell you some things about the Native American legends. I worked with some Navajo when I was still living in New Mexico, and we once talked to a Diné holy man about it when we got caught up with stories about skinwalkers. When the Native Americans talk about skinwalkers, they generally don't say the word skinwalker. There's a bit of derision for the term being a white man's word. The proper term for one is Naglashi, though again, they rarely say that, but for different reasons. They believe that these old spirits are so evil that they can feed off fear and pain, so natives who take it seriously will avoid saying that name, as both a matter of avoiding bad luck, and avoiding the fear attached to the name. Generally in conversation they'll refer to skinwalkers as evil, an old ghost, a lost man, lost ghost, things like that. First thing you should remember if you decide to talk to natives about this is that they take it seriously. The holy man we talked to was my friend's grandfather, so there were definitely positive ties there, but when we just up and asked him about it he got genuinely angry with us. If you're just some stranger they've never met and you come in asking about skinwalkers, they're going to be suspicious as fuck because they think skinwalkers often try to trick people into talking about it, so they can tell which holy men really know what they're talking about, because if a holy man knows the old way, he could be a threat to that skinwalker. Skinwalker can apply to one of two things. The first and most common is a holy man, medicine man, or tribal leader who gained their power through a profane ritual that involves the murder of someone they love and trust, though depending on the legend it can also involve things like treachery, incest, and profaning holy things. This ritual grants them great vitality and strength, slows or stops their aging, and allows them to change their shape into different animals, but always predatory species. However, their crimes and the ritual corrupts their spirit, making them into truly capital fucking letters evil, sadistic, cruel, and irredeemable. These people genuinely scare the fuck out of many Navajo. They're very old, very smart, very strong, very fast, can change their shape, often know a corrupted form of Diné magic, and they're evil. The other thing, sometimes called Naglashi, are the corrupted messengers of the Dayan Diné or holy people, basically messengers from demigod ancestors, somewhat analogous to angels. These messengers had a specific job to do in the Navajo creation myth, but some of them refused to leave the earth when their task was done, and their refusal led to arrogance and cruelty, as they had defied the good commands of the holy people. These messengers have great power, but that power turned evil when they turned their backs on the holy people, and supposedly these corrupt beings, these first Naglashi taught the first, human Naglashi, the ritual that allowed them to gain their power. These things make human Naglashi look like a joke. They're thousands of years old, superhuman in every way, can shape change into any animal, and depending on what legend you believe, they're either incredibly difficult to kill or outright immortal. The only way the Navajo know of stopping them is when a holy man either uses the old way to bind the creature, or if they can trap it, hurt it enough that it weakens, and drive it away through force, though that is rarely attempted. As a disclaimer here, I don't know if I believe this stuff. Never seen any evidence, never asked for any because it seemed disrespectful, but the Diné sure as hell believe it, to the point where they don't even like talking about it. Make of this what you will. But, this the Skinwalker is to take a loved one to the Skinwalker tribe and have them kill, eat them. Is probably an altered, different version of the story of the original inhuman Naglashi teaching the human Naglashi how to shapeshift.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.